So this is the final video in my Drawing with Modern OpenGL set, and this one's going to use the built-in VertexArrayObject class in NGL. And all this class really does is it wraps up all of the functionality that I showed in the last one, so that we can create individual vertex array objects, add different bunches of data to them, edit that data, and modify things in various ways. So it's a sort of vertex array object utility class to make it easier. This is the class that's used internally in NGL for all of the primitives and various other elements that are in there. So it's got a method called createVAO, which is our way of creating it. Now we want this vertex array object only to ever be created as a pointer. So the constructor, assignment operator, and copy constructor are all hidden private in this class. The only way that we can grab it is by calling this method createVAO, which will return a pointer to the vertex array object, which in turn basically calls the private constructor. This way it forces anyone using it to always create this as a pointer, and if we need to remove it, we make a call to the remove VAO, and that will get rid of it as well. So everything else more or less is analogous to the process in the last video in creating the data and setting the data. It's just that it will all be methods within the vertex array object. So first thing we do is hash include ngl vertex array object in our class, and then I've got, instead of my mvao, which was a GL unsigned int last time, now I've just called it an ngl vertex array object pointer. So we're going to use this to store our data. The basic setup is the same as before. We're initializing our OpenGL context. We are creating our view and projection matrices. We're loading in our shader using one of the built-in NGL shaders. And create points is now going to run off and do more or less the same thing as before, only now it's just using vertex array object. So first I'm going to populate an array of points. Next I'm going to say mvao equals new equals ngl vertex array object createVAO, and we can set a default value for the creation method. We'll see later that we can override this if we wish when we draw. So what this is going to do is return that pointer to mvao, and next we're going to bind the vertex array object. And this is exactly the same as calling bind previously. The main advantage this has over the other methods is that this will check before we make other calls to see if the VAO is actually bound. So there is error checking within the class, so that if you're getting weird behavior, it will tell you you've tried to set data on something that's not bound, you've tried to draw on something that's not bound, and various other debugging. So it makes it easier for debugging. Next, set data is going to go off, and what that does is it creates a new vertex buffer object, and it then copies the data across that we're passing in. So we're passing in how big that data is in bytes and where that data starts. Next, we're setting our vertex attribute pointer, again the same as before, which attribute we want to set, how big it is, whether it's floating point, the stride, and the offset. Finally, we're setting how big that data is, so draw knows how many elements to draw, and we unbind the VAO. So the functionality that we did in the previous example is still there, it's just that this has now been wrapped into the VAO class. The update, again very similar, we're going to update our array of data, and there is a built-in method called update data, which will go and copy that data across. And this is the equivalent, and we could actually do it with our VAO by calling these lines of code here. We can grab the raw vertex buffer ID from our VAO just by indexing in, and the advantage that this class has is we can also add more than one vertex buffer object to our vertex array object, so we can have multiple data in there. When we render, again very similar, we bind, we draw, we unbind. So if I run this now, we'll get the same array of data that's running through. In this case it's still set to triangles for some reason. I think that's because I need to rebuild all, because it's all in the same subproject. I'll just rebuild that. And there we go, it's drawing as points. If I go back, when I draw, I can go GL lines and rerun. And you'll see our data is lines, and so on as before. We can do line loop, give us a series of continuing line loop, which will give us a series of lines, and so on. So this is the simplest way of accessing things within NGL. As I say, NGL is built around this class, so all the internal primitives that are being drawn are of this format. And there is a series of other demos showing you how to build up these vertex array objects, for example, to draw a simple void, to procedurally generate a sphere. It's used in many of my demos, so it's worth looking at the source code and getting an understanding of the analogous OpenGL commands if you want to write your own slightly more efficient classes, but also you can extend and modify this code if you need it for your own drawing.